Sam, can you explain to me what a K-hole is?
Yeah, so a K-hole is when people have too much ketamine. It's almost always associated with recreational use. Ketamine is a sedative, it's an anesthetic. So when people do too much, they get to a point where the world kind of closes in on them and it narrows like tunnel vision, and it almost is like dark, like there you can't your peripheral vision, it starts to almost put you out. And it can be really scary. You don't have hardly any coordination of your body. You're not steady on your feet. Maybe you can't even move. If you're up, you know, vertical, you might fall over. You can't really walk. You coordinate your movements. You can't speak. And it can be really scary for a lot of people. And, the dissociative effects of ketamine are a spectrum. And there's a huge range in between a sub perceptible amount or a microdose and being fully sedated for surgery. And a K-hole is definitely closer onto the surgery side, where it just kind of starts to shut down some of your voluntary, and at a certain point, maybe even some of your involuntary bodily functions. And it's generally not regarded as a pleasant experience by anyone. And so people who I talked to who thought they were doing a line of coke one time and it ended up being K, or these kinds of stories you hear, often report getting to that point because the amount of cocaine that you would do for recreation is probably 10 times the amount that you would in one dose that you would do of ketamine for recreation. So you hear about these kinds of funny stories and mix-ups when I talk to so many different people. They go, "Oh yeah, I did it one time by accident," and stuff like that. And that's what can happen.
Yeah.
People don't get to that point in our clinic, but yeah, that's what a K-hole is.
So it's basically due to the dissociative effects, and that's like, you do too much, the more like a chance of you getting those dissociative effects.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have a dissociative effect, but that's getting more into a sedative effect,
Yeah.
into an almost like anesthetic level kind of. You start to shut down,
Yeah.
and it can be scary, really disorienting and confusing.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've seen a few people go through it, and they just, it's almost like they fall over and everyone's like, they're okay, they're in a K-hole. And I was actually watching, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Kill Tony. It's like, it's a live comedy show, you could say. And like during one episode is actually somebody going through like a K-hole during the whole thing, and they're talking about it, and it like blew my mind because it's, people do it recreationally, there's a safe way to do it, and there's, you could say a not safe way to do it. It is what it is. You just gotta be careful with those things. So, and I've actually seen people like in person go through it, and it's a pretty intense thing. It's just like, whoa, like it looks super scary to the outside person that maybe has never, been in like a circle where, drugs are being used. It's a very scary thing. So I was always curious on what the hell actually happens when somebody goes through these K-holes, because I hear it's like, okay, they're going through a K-hole, they're fine, and it kind of is what it is. But it doesn't last long, right? They come out of it usually fine, and then it's only lasts a few minutes.
No, it depends on how you've taken the ketamine and how much. Because people usually snort it when they take it recreationally, but some people use it IM as well, intramuscularly, and they inject it into the muscle. And then that's a slower rate of absorption. And also, it's going to last longer and take more time to get out of the body. Because when you squirt a bunch of it into the muscle, it's gradually goes into the bloodstream from there. And it can happen actually rather quickly, but not as quickly as snorting it, which is like into the lungs and then through the bloodstream, like real fast, like within a minute or less. But no, it can last. I mean, it can last an hour, it can last an hour and a half. And then gradually wear off. When you come out of it, it's not like you just snap out of it and you're fine. You might start to feel like you're coming back, but then you're really out of it still for a while, So the actual KO could be an hour and a half, and then you might have a couple hours before you feel even more semi okay again, So yeah, it can definitely mess up your day.
Yeah. definitely, yeah. Because I was thinking is I'm not like I was thinking like a DMT trip. A DMT trip is very quick, and then you come out of it, fairly quickly. So I was thinking it's almost like the same thing where it's only like a few minutes. But if you're telling me if it lasts like an hour, could last an hour, that's like super intense. That's super scary.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, DMT is known to be one of the most powerful psychedelics in the world, but also one of the shortest acting, right? Like a 10 or 15-minute trip. But people often say that during that time, it might have felt like a lifetime. So it's so interesting about how our perception of time is altered with psychedelics. And that's the thing, 15 minutes doesn't really matter that much if you feel like you just lived like a whole life in that time, It's to you, that's a long time. But yeah, it can definitely last. And also, I wanted to say, like what you mentioned, sometimes like someone would do it and then they might fall over or something. That's where it can get really dangerous. And depending on where you are and what you're doing, if you're in a place where somebody could be a predator, could take advantage of you, whether that be sexually or rob you or assault you in another way, or you could be in at a party or an event or somewhere, you might get trampled by people. I've heard stories of people literally falling over and hitting their head. So you got to be really careful with this stuff. You got to know what you're doing. I don't advocate for recreational drug use. I don't advocate for people to do ketamine on their own. There's a lot of risks to it. I'm just having a candid chat with you now about some of these questions just to educate people on it. But if I will say, I do believe in harm reduction. And if people are going to do it, I'm just letting you know, you got to be really smart and safe. A lot of drugs have fentanyl in it nowadays. That stuff can kill you so fast. Smaller amount than a grain of rice in your bag can kill you. No question. We've seen that more and more over the last few years, which is really unfortunate. There's also a lot of designer drugs out there that are copycat versions of other common drugs. So you might get something that's similar effects of ketamine, but it's not ketamine. That might have much worse side effects or higher risks or like a worse come down, So there's a lot that goes into it. I would say ultimately just be smart, be safe, know where your stuff comes from, test it. You can get fentanyl test strips easily for free in a lot of places. So test your drugs, do it with people you trust. If you don't know how it's going to affect you, do it in a controlled environment in private at least once or more than once before you go and do it at a big festival or an event. Don't drive a car. Just be smart. Don't do stuff where you're going to put yourself in a bad spot.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more with you, Sam.